Joe Cobert.
How are you doing, Scott? I'm delighted to be here after hearing about real estate help many times, trying to coordinate to get on. We're here. And it's a thrill on my part to be able to spend time with you because you're one of my favorite people. And I know that I was supposedly the person that helped mentor you at one point.
You did.
But everybody at this point in time knows Scott Nell. He needs no other introduction. And I think it's a wonderful thing that you've been doing, all your activities. I'll be glad that when you ask me some questions to fill you in.
Well, I want to say first off that, when I first started doing networking in my business, you were one of the guys when I was just a newbie that took me under your wing and invited me to events and were always very kind to me, even when I was not a seasoned agent. I was just a young guy, well, not so young, but younger starting off. And so I just want to thank you for that because not a lot of people do that, but you've got the giving and the mentor spirit. So thank you for that.
I enjoy seeing people progress, and it's one of the pleasures that I get out of life. See if we can get more out of that these days.
Absolutely. And so so people know you, top seasoned real estate attorney. You do have a focus on finance, but the truth is, as long as you've been around, you could probably speak to most things, but finance is one of the things that you emphasize. Is that right?
I do. I've had the opportunity actually to work with you when I was helping on a finance aspect.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your bringing me in. We were able to come up with a very successful and creative solution for the client. And that was in a carryback note. And she was quite happy with you and with me that we figured out what she needed and got it done.
Yeah, that was interesting because that particular house was very unique. So for us to get her to the best net, we had to get creative. So I said, would you consider some seller financing? Found someone who was going to use it. I think it was for some type of a rehab or something like that. Willing to give top dollar for it when no one else would, but it's because of the way the deal was structured. And you structured it in such a way that really protected her, protected the buyer. And then what does he do? 2 years in, he pays the whole thing off. Doesn't even use the full 5 years. So that was
great. But we wanted to make sure that he didn't pay her in the year of sale, so she had a little bit of opportunity to spread her profit tax-wise.
Well, that's whenever it comes to that kind of deal, I always look to you for sure. But I know I've had lunch a few times, and you've got some pretty interesting stories. So why don't you give us a taste of one of the stories that you think we'd be interested in?
All right. Well, I'll talk about a story that was about a year and a half ago that it came up. A fellow that I had worked for in solving some real estate problems years before contacted me and said, Joe, I've got somebody who wants to buy the house that I've got in Beechwood Canyon. And the person is a tenant. She just hit the big time as an actress and she's getting a bunch of money. So now she says, can I buy this from you? And there's no broker here involved. And so would you help prepare a contract? And I, of course, said, I can't represent her. I represent you only. He said, great. So we started. And they had a pretty good idea of what they wanted the terms to be. But I said, we have to, get a title report to make sure everything is what we expect it to be. And it was good that we did that because what came back, there was a picture of the property and it didn't include where this lady was parking her cars, 2 cars, and where he had parked. And I said, there's something odd here. And so went back to the title company and asked, and they said, oh, that property belongs to the guy up the hill, this winding hill with a steep cliff. And I said, why would somebody do that? That's weird. But now we got to find some way to get that taken care of because that's an important ingredient for this lady. So what I did was I talked to the client and asked him, what's the history of this? and asked the lady what's the history. And throughout, they've been using that for cars. Uh,
Uh-huh.
Nobody came in and did anything about it. And it was very obvious and open that there were these cars there. So I said, well, why don't, to my client, why don't you go up the hill, introduce yourself to the guy, and offer him, yeah, $10,000. You make your deal.
Uh,
So um, I
hey.
suggested to the client, he go, and we can resolve this readily. Well, not so much, because the guy up the hill had dreams of grandeur then. Oh, they need something from me. And dollar signs get him. And I said, it's a shame, because now we're going to have to do something that we would have loved to avoid. There's a doctrine in the law called prescriptive easement.
Yep.
And that's when somebody for more than 5 years has been using uh, property in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and it's continuous even with their successor. Well, you can get a judge to give you a court order, court judgment that says you have an easement for that purpose. Hate to have to do it, but maybe this guy will only respond with something. So I cranked out a quick complaint. I used to do litigation. I still know how to do that.
Uh-huh.
And said, the way we're going to make sure this guy understands us, I'm going to prepare it, have a summons issued, and get somebody to serve the guy. And the next thing you know, about a day later, I get a call from the client says, this guy wants us to work it out with us. I said, good.
You think?
Now, but I want him, to have an attorney, because I don't want to have some awkwardness. Uh, and I can prepare an easement agreement, and it'll work out fine.
Mm-hmm.
Little did they know, of course, that I was going to try to plant a few seeds in that easement agreement that would help us. And I
Mm-hmm.
did. So the other lawyer was fine. I drafted it. He said, everything looks great. What I had added into that easement agreement was something which was extraordinarily beneficial. I put
Mm-hmm.
in a provision that I just came up with, finishing up the story a little bit. So I put into the agreement a provision that the owner of the property not only would get an easement, but for the first 5 years after it's signed, if that party, which was then going to be the lady who's going to buy it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, was willing to pay $1,000 or something like that, the guy would sign over a deed if we could get a lot line adjustment. Well, what did that mean? That meant we were converting a mere easement to put cars on to whatever it was that she could be able to get. I
Mm-hmm.
envisioned a garage with an ADU and all that kind of stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
said to my client, she's getting a hell of a deal here.
Uh-huh.
And she was just lit up. She said, you can do that? And I said, let's see if they sign it. They did. Well, that was great, but there was still yet something to come. She was getting a loan, and we had to get title insurance for
Mm-hmm.
the lender. And the title company that the client had gone to, it's not my choice, he had someone, they said, oh, we don't insure easements. They're difficult these days, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, and I called some others. I don't know what's going to happen. I said, stop. I belong to provisors. If
Mm-hmm.
I if I can find somebody, it'll be in provisors. I quickly called a friend of mine who's in one of my chapters, EC2, and I told him the story. He said, yeah, I can get it for you. He basically went to State Farm, as it turned out. The next day, I was able to tell them, you guys got a deal. You
Mm-hmm.
now have the ability to own this fabulous opportunity that you didn't even think about when you started, and you should be quite pleased. My client got paid, everything worked out. So that's a great opportunity to be able to pull some rabbits out of the hats.
I love that. I love that you found value that no one else was even seeing.
Yep.
That's
Uh, and I'll be glad to tell another story with
yeah.
an interesting twist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so uh, I represented a fellow who owned a printing company in San Fernando, in the valley, city of San Fernando. And he had borrowed money from a very wealthy man years back, and guy got a note and a deed of trust against his business property. For strange reasons, the very wealthy guy put this note and deed of trust in the drawer. The deed of
Mm-hmm.
trust, that was a copy of the deed of trust. The regular was recorded, and it just sat there. And the time went by, and a couple of years, and the guy came. Oh, I've got this. My client said to him, I've got this little change I'd like to make. Can we do that? Okay, they made a modification, recorded it. Guy put it back in the drawer. 11 years go by.
Uh-huh.
He hasn't made any payments. The guy passed away. The son goes through the drawer and finds it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, it was just at that time was when my guy was trying to refinance the building, and now he sends in a request for them to, give them the demand. They demand hundreds of thousands of dollars of interest that had been accumulating. And I said, that's not good. Do you know whether when you did that modification, it was recorded? I think so, but I don't know. I said, okay. He was about 11:45. I said, go to lunch. I get on the phone, call one of my title friends, also improvisers, say, I need a quickie. I need to get a copy of the deed of trust on this particular property. Shoots it over. 10 minutes later, I'm looking at it. My eyes light up. Why? Because there's something in there that is very rare, but it happens.
Uh-huh.
Usually the due date is not in the deed of trust. It's only in the note.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, though, when they did the modification, it was written in there. Why is that important? Because there is a law that at the time, I don't know anybody else who knew it but me, uh, called the Marketable Record Title Act, which was put into play in the 80s. No cases ever at that point in time had interpreted it. And it was done because the title companies wanted to clear out old, stale deeds of trust. And so it says if nothing has happened in the last 10 years, you can, the deed of trust is dead. It's
Uh-huh.
an unsecured note. So I bring that to the guy's attention. He said, really? And I said, yeah. Um, so you have a lot of leverage with this guy. The son who wanted to get some found money. And the son hires a lawyer. And the lawyer sues and says, not going to do this. In the meantime, I had sat down with the client, the loan broker, and the title company, Commonwealth Land Title, the title company. And I
Uh-huh.
told them about this law, and I told them that, interestingly, in what we call the legislative history, they just explained why the law was passed and said in there, this supersedes anything else. Wow. I never saw that before. So we
Mm-hmm.
have to go to court, and the other lawyer is being difficult, and I say I'm going to file a motion for what we call summary judgment. It says if it supersedes everything else, what do you got to say?
Right.
Well, we go to court in Chatsworth, and I start to say something, and the judge says, "No, no, Mr. Cobert, don't stop." I'm hoping that's a good sign. And he turns to the other guy and says, "Mr. So and so, what is it about something supersedes everything that you don't understand?" The guy slinks away, and then we worked everything out. We had by that time we had run up some legal fees, and because there was a note, the legal fees were something we could recover.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I added to it is that law only killed the deed of trust. It didn't kill the note. However, there's a statute of limitations for written documents like notes, 4 years. That was long past. So we were cool. Well, what was amazing is before we even got to court, the title company said to the lender, we'll approve it. We think it's Joe's argument is so correct. We'll do something we've never done, which is insure in advance. I said to my client, they're taking a risk. They're putting it. So when the
That's all.
lawsuit was filed, I had a co-counsel. The Commonwealth lawyer was with me. It was really fun deal. And so I got an enjoyment out of that.
That's great.
Another quick story. Okay. So back when I was doing litigation, I was representing a good friend who owned a title company, an escrow company. And she was dragged into a case that wasn't justified. Some crooks did stuff and they then lost out. The crooks had gotten money from investors who didn't know what was going on. So to save face, they sued. Even sued the escrow company. Well, we then were going to a deposition of their expert witness on this. Their expert witness was a guy named Marvin Starr. Well, Marvin Starr is legendary in the real estate law business. He and his partner, Mr. Miller, have this treatise called Miller and Starr, Law of California Real Estate. So they thought, I guess, he would scare us. What I decided to do, there were a bunch of other lawyers. I said, may I go first? Sure. I brought with me his book,
Mm-hmm.
in which he said escrow is not responsible to do those kind of things. They take instructions. They're not out there looking to find out who's committing fraud. So
Mm-hmm.
I started off and I asked, you're the guy this, and I led him on the branch to pat himself on the back and all these good things. And you've written this book, Miller and Starr, Law of California Real Estate, and everything in there you believe is accurate. Isn't that correct? Let me show you this volume. This is volume so-and-so about escrows. You would have read that, wouldn't you? And it said exactly opposite of what he was trying to testify to. Wait, can we stop? The other guy says, you need to take a break. Come back. Escrow company was dismissed. And this guy was just red in the face. He had been caught trying to play a game on us, and we were ready. I knew about it. I impeached him on his own words. So that was cool.
And so when you brought that up, he didn't realize what you were doing at the time?
Not at first, because I was complimenting him. I was building the road for him to be glad to walk down, and then, oops, how do I get out of this thing? And I think he realized it just as I was asking him to look at the book.
And then he realized, oh.
Then it's a little too late.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the fun ones that I had to do. Tell you about one more?
Yeah.
One more? Okay. All of these people later became friends that I've talked about, the clients that I met. There's a lady that was renting a condo in a very nice building in North Hollywood, probably the nicest condo conversion in that area. And it had been converted by two brothers who had sold out 18 of the 20 units. They were living in one, and she was renting the 20th. And she really wanted to be able to buy it, but she had a problem that her ex-husband had run up tax debts, and she wasn't able to get out from under them. So she's been paying them off. She couldn't get a regular loan without more time to pay it. She was doing very well as a financial advisor. So it wasn't income. It was just getting that off the record. And I said, well, let's see what we can do. Go introduce myself to one of the brothers. It turned out he was a real estate lawyer, and suggested to him, listen, I got an idea. We want to make it something worthwhile for you to have this lady whom he thought was a great tenant. We'd like to have her go forward with you, but make it economically worth your while to do it. I had spoken to a loan broker, also a provisor's member that who said, I can probably, get it done when you get to a certain place. You paid off so-and-so taxes. I asked the client said, that could take, 9 to 12 months, maybe even. I then went back to this guy who seemed to like me at that point because I was talking about how I could do something to help him. I said, we need a 1 year period of time. We need, in essence, to get an option to buy, and we're going to pay you an additional amount one half of which will be applied to the purchase price if we close, and one half is extra rent for you.
Mm-hmm.
How good could it be? He said, that sounds excellent. We got
Mm-hmm.
right down to the wire, and the person who as in close friend of both of us,
Mm-hmm.
she was able to pull it off and get it done in the last minute. So the lady got the place. And okay, that seems like it should be the end of it. No, the lawyer calls me and says, I practiced real estate law for a lot of time, and I'm not sure I would have thought of that. I have a friend in lives in Florida and wants to sell a building here. Would you be willing to represent him? I'll give him your name. So yeah, I ended up being able to get client referrals from that guy who was on the other side of the deal. My client loved me for it, and we've been friends ever since. And she's doing very successfully as a financial advisor. So that's another twist.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it nice when sometimes even when you go up against, other counsel and stuff, and then you get to know them, and then you guys can become friends and be able to help
Yeah,
each other.
and you've talked about it. Sometimes you have some antagonism created with the opposing broker, and as soon as you guys start talking about solutions and it's a viable one, you guys, hey, we're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a win-win. So I'm
Absolutely.
always delighted to look for win-wins. I'm also delighted though when I can find stuff that maybe some other people didn't see, and also are really creative and find something that you have to be a pro to understand. That comes from my background of I like to think way ahead.
Mm-hmm.
It helped me when I was in court cases because kind of figured out what would happen. It started when I was young because I played chess,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to think way ahead. Back in those days, I had a great memory. I don't anymore. Not quite as good as somebody we know, but it's a good one. And so that helps me a lot.
That's awesome. Hey, do you have a charity or something
Yes,
that
I
you
do.
share?
In the late 90s, I had a guy who actually is coming to these networking lunches that you attend one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he talked to me about he wanted to do something called Food on Foot. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Food on Foot began as a place where on Saturdays in a dog park in Santa Monica, and Sundays in the parking lot of the uh, LGBTQ headquarters. They didn't use it on Sundays. We would we'd get food from different places, El Pollo Loco, whatever it is, and we started handing it out. And word
Mm-hmm.
got around, and we got to a place where there were 300 people coming to these things. Well,
Wow.
Santa Monica didn't want us to be there anymore, so we had to give up the Saturday thing. But we kept Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and we decided that that's all fine and dandy, but we have a broader interest to be able to help these people get off the street and get jobs and do stuff. How can we come up with a way to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, first, we got to make sure that they have some self esteem because they really didn't, most of them, be on the street. And we had to help them come to the realization that it's not scary to go back into society.
Mm-hmm.
So we started bringing them clothes and things to get them dressed. And then we said, now we want to be able to help get you jobs. But first, you have to show your willingness to do some stuff. And what we decided to do was have them do even menial things like clean up Hollywood streets in the morning before coming. And if they did that 5 times, then they got a pin. The first pin was you get free bus tokens and whatever like that. And
Mm-hmm.
then when they did it the 10th time, we looked for jobs. And we got them jobs at Tender Greens, places like that. Well, this was a fledgling thing. We needed some backing. Fortunately, Hollywood found us,
Mm-hmm.
the entertainment people. Neil Patrick Harris was one of them. Neil
Uh-huh.
Patrick Harris went on Celebrity Jeopardy and won $50,000 for
Hmm.
charity, and he designated ours. And that
Oh,
really got us off. So since that time, it's still operating. The original guy uh, moved on. They put the board voted for a much more I don't know, bureaucratic kind of setup, and more ability to penetrate the world. But they still are around. A lot of people go there. They set up something called the $98 Club, which if
hmm.
you join, you get to come all the time, and you pay a contribution of $98 a month, about 1,100 and something a year, all for charity. That's my favorite charity.
That's nice. And it's called Food on Foot. Awesome. That I never heard that story about Neil Patrick Harris. That's pretty good, darn cool.
Yeah, well, it so happened that, as I said, being in Hollywood, they caught some people's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Friends of ours, who we didn't even know it, they have gone down. A lot of people would take their kids there, kids that wanted to earn points for school and doing good
Right.
things, and it became really something that was enjoyable and a big help. So that's my favorite charity.
That's great. That's great. I've never heard of that one before. Wonderful. Hey Joe, thanks for taking the time. You didn't end up in the dark anymore after I finally plugged that thing in.
I came into the light when I saw Scott Nell.
So,
Thanks, Scott.
yes, thank you too.